On a Monday morning in March of 1968, a 22-year-old farmer named Danny Jarvis drove his Farmall H into the parking lot of Becker Equipment in Caddo County, Oklahoma. The tractor was making a sound no tractor should make, a grinding, clanking death rattle that had started 3 days earlier and gotten worse with every hour of work. Danny had nursed it 12 miles from his farm to the dealership, praying with every turn of the wheels that it would make it. It made it barely. Carl Becker, the owner, came out to meet him, 53 years old, 25 years selling John Deere equipment. He listened to the engine for 10 seconds and shook his head. Crankshaft, cracked or broken. You're not going anywhere on that tractor until it's fixed. Danny felt his stomach drop. How much to fix it? New crankshaft, machining, labor. You're looking at $800. Danny had $23 in his pocket and maybe 40 more in a coffee can at home. 800 might as well have been 8 million. I don't have that kind of money, Mr. Becker. I know you don't. Here's your other option. I'll buy the whole tractor for 200, scrap value. You put that towards something newer. Danny looked at the Farmall. His father had bought it used in 1952. Danny had learned to drive on it. It had worked their 160 acres for 16 years. What if I could weld the crack myself? Carl laughed. Not a mean laugh, more the laugh of a man who's heard something absurd. Son, you can't weld a crankshaft. That's precision machining. You'd need a machine shop, specialty tools, years of training. A weld would never hold. You'd be wasting your time and your money. How much would the welding rod cost? $5–10, but you'd be throwing it away. That weld won't last a month, maybe not even a week. Danny was quiet, then he nodded. I'll take my chances. He climbed back on the dying Farmall and drove it home. Carl watched him go, shaking his head. That boy is going to learn an expensive lesson, he told his mechanic. Some things can't be fixed, better to know that now. Now let me tell you about Danny Jarvis, because you need to understand him to understand what he did next. Danny was born in 1946 on a 160-acre Oklahoma red dirt farm. His father Harold died in 1965, heart attack, sudden, in the middle of spring planting. Danny was 19. His older brother had already left for the oil fields. His younger sister was 14 and still in school. That left Danny. He took over the farm the same week he buried his father. No transition, no training, no choice. But here's the thing. In high school, while other boys played football, Danny spent his free periods in shop class. His teacher was Mr. Patterson, a former Navy welder who'd worked on battleships in World War II. Welding isn't just about melting metal, Mr. Patterson would say. It's about understanding metal, how it moves when it heats, how it shrinks when it cools. Master that and you can fix almost anything. Danny mastered it. By his senior year, he was doing work that impressed even Patterson. Steady hands, patient, precise. You could make a living at this, Patterson told him. I'm going to be a farmer. Then you'll be a farmer who can weld. That's a powerful combination. Patterson was right. Danny didn't realize how right until that March morning with a dead tractor and $23. Now let me tell you about the repair, because this is where Danny's legend began. He drove the Farmall into the barn and spent Monday getting the engine apart. By Tuesday morning, he had the crankshaft on his workbench. The crack was obvious, a hairline fracture across one of the main bearing journals. Exactly what Carl said couldn't be fixed. Danny studied it for a long time. He thought about what Patterson had taught him about stress, about heat distribution, about how a crankshaft moves, spinning thousands of times per minute, absorbing explosive piston force, transferring it to the wheels. A regular weld wouldn't work. Carl was right about that. The stress would crack it again within days, but what if it wasn't a regular weld? Danny drove to town and spent $12 on specialty welding rod rated for high-stress applications. $3 more for grinding supplies, 15 total. He worked through Tuesday night and all day Wednesday. First he ground out the crack, widening it into a V-shape that would hold a weld properly. Then he preheated the entire crankshaft slowly, raising its temperature so the weld wouldn't create new stress fractures when it cooled. The welding itself took 4 hours, slow, methodical passes, building up layer after layer of new metal the way Patterson had taught him, never rushing, never forcing, letting the metal tell him what it needed. When the weld was done, he wrapped the crankshaft in insulating blankets and let it cool over 12 hours. No shortcuts, no rapid cooling that might undo everything. Thursday morning he ground and polished the weld smooth, measured the alignment, the balance, the roundness, borrowed tools from Patterson's shop to check everything twice. He reassembled the engine Thursday night. Friday afternoon the Farmall was ready. Danny climbed into the seat, said a prayer to whatever gods protect farmers and fools, and turned the key. The engine caught, ran, sounded good. He let it idle for an hour. Nothing. Drove it around the barnyard, then out to the fields, then back. Nothing. The $15 weld was holding. Now let me tell you about the moment Carl Becker came to see for himself. News travels fast in small towns. By the following Monday, everyone in Caddo County knew Danny Jarvis had welded his own crankshaft, and the repair had worked. Carl drove out to the Jarvis farm to see it with his own eyes. He found Danny in the field plowing with the Farmall, engine running smooth and strong. When Danny reached the end of the row and stopped, Carl walked over and asked to listen to the engine. He leaned in close, ear near the block, listening the way a doctor listens to a heartbeat. After a minute, he straightened up. "Sounds good. I wouldn't have believed it if I wasn't hearing it myself." "Thank you, sir." Carl looked at Danny with an expression that mixed respect with irritation. "That weld won't last, you know. Might hold for a month, might hold for a year, but eventually the stress will crack it again." Danny smiled. "Then I'll weld it again." Carl laughed, a different laugh than before, something in it that sounded almost like admiration. "You're a stubborn one, aren't you? My father always said that was my best quality." Carl turned to leave, then stopped. "If you ever want a job, come see me. I could use someone who can fix things that can't be fixed. I've got a farm to run, but I appreciate the offer." Carl drove away shaking his head. "Now let me ask you something. Have you ever been told something was impossible and then proved it wasn't?" That's exactly where Danny Jarvis stood in the spring of 1968. He'd done the impossible, welded a crankshaft and made it hold. But Carl said a month, maybe a year. Eventually the stress would win. 18 years later, neither of them had to find out who was right. Let me tell you about those 18 years. The weld held, not for a month, not for a year. For all of 1968 and beyond, the Farmall kept working the Jarvis field season after season. Word spread. By 1970, other farmers started bringing Danny their unfixable equipment: cracked transmission housings, broken hydraulic cylinders, snapped axle shafts, things dealers said couldn't be repaired, things that supposedly required expensive replacement parts. Danny fixed them. Not always. Some things really were beyond saving, but more often than anyone expected, he had the skills. And he had something else, a willingness to try when everyone else had given up. He didn't charge much. These were his neighbors, as broke as he was, enough to cover materials, maybe a little extra for his time. By 1975, his reputation extended beyond Caddo County. Farmers drove 50 miles to bring him equipment their local dealers had written off. Junkyard Danny, they called him, a nickname that started as an insult and became a badge of honor. Danny's barn became a workshop. He bought a proper welding setup, a lathe, a milling machine. All used, all repaired by his own hands. He kept farming his 160 acres, but the repair work became almost as important as the crops. And through all of it, the Farmall kept running. The $15 weld kept holding. Meanwhile, Carl Becker's story was going in the opposite direction. The 1970s were boom years. High prices, easy credit. Carl sold more tractors in that decade than the previous two combined. New John Deeres rolled off his lot every week, financed on 5-year loans that farmers signed without reading the fine print. "You've got to have the latest equipment," Carl would tell them. "That old tractor is costing you money every day you keep it." The farmers listened. They traded in paid-off machines for shiny new ones. They took on debt they couldn't really afford. They trusted Carl Becker, 30 years in the business. Surely he knew what he was talking about. What Carl didn't tell them was that booms never last. The farm crisis hit in the early 1980s. Interest rates spiked. Commodity prices crashed. Land values collapsed. All those farmers who'd bought new tractors on credit found themselves owing more than they could pay. And Carl's dealership was in trouble. By 1983, he was repossessing more tractors than he was selling. His lot filled with equipment nobody could afford to buy. His bank started asking uncomfortable questions. Out in the county, more and more farmers were taking their broken equipment to Junkyard Danny instead. Fix it, don't replace it. That became the motto of the farm crisis, and nobody fixed things like Danny Jarvis. In the spring of 1986, Carl Becker's dealership closed. The bank took the building, the inventory, everything. The foreclosure auction was held on a Saturday in April. Danny was there. He stood at the back of the crowd and watched the auctioneer work through the inventory. Tractors selling for a fraction of their value. Tools going for pennies on the dollar. Then the building came up. The building where Danny had been told 18 years earlier that his crankshaft couldn't be fixed. Where Carl had laughed at his $15 repair. Opening bid, $60,000. A few hands went up half-heartedly. 62, 65, 68. Danny raised his hand, 70,000. The crowd turned to look. They knew who he was. They also knew something the half-hearted bidders didn't, that Danny Jarvis had been saving money for 18 years while they'd been spending it. That his repair business had been thriving while their farms were failing. The bidding continued. Danny matched every offer. At 82,000, the others dropped out. Sold to Danny Jarvis. Danny walked to the front, shook hands with the auctioneer, and signed the paperwork. As he was signing, he felt a presence at his elbow. Carl Becker, 71 years old, smaller, older, defeated. The confident dealer who'd laughed at a 22-year-old's impossible repair was gone. "Danny." "Mr. Becker." Carl looked at the building, then at Danny. "I suppose you're feeling pretty good right now." Danny thought about it. "No, sir, I'm not. I remember what it was like standing in your parking lot with a broken tractor and $23. I remember feeling like everything was over. I don't wish that feeling on anyone, not even someone who laughed at me." Carl was quiet. When he spoke, his voice was thick. "That weld, the one I said wouldn't last a month, is it still holding?" Danny smiled. 18 years and counting." Carl laughed, a sad, tired laugh. "I've been wrong about a lot of things, Danny, but I think that was the biggest one. You gave me something better than you know, Mr. Becker. You gave me a reason to prove you wrong." Danny extended his hand. "No hard feelings, I mean that." Carl shook it. "What are you going to do with the building?" "What do you think? Fix things. Same as I've been doing for 18 years, just now I'll have a proper shop." Carl nodded slowly. "You need any help? I spent 30 years learning about tractors. Might as well be useful for something." Danny considered it. The man who'd laughed at him, offering to work for him. "Can you start Monday?" The sign went up in June of 1986. "JARVIS Repair. We fix what dealers won't." From the first day it was busy. Carl Becker worked there for 5 years until he retired. One day, watching Danny weld a cracked engine block, he said, "I spent 30 years telling people they needed new equipment, that their old stuff was junk. I was wrong. Most of it just needed someone who cared enough to fix it right." Danny kept his eyes on his work. It's not about old or new. It's about understanding what you have and treating it with respect. Carl smiled, "Like you did with that crankshaft." "Like I did with that crankshaft. 20 years now." 20 years. "I'm glad you proved me wrong, Danny. Somebody needed to." The Farmall H ran until 1998, 30 years on a repair that was supposed to last a month. When it finally stopped, it wasn't the crankshaft that failed, it was everything else. 30 years of Oklahoma dust and heat had simply worn the rest of the tractor out. Danny parked it just inside the front door of Jarvis Repair, put a sign on it. 1952 Farmall H crankshaft, welded 1968 for $15. They said it wouldn't last a month. It lasted 30 years. Never stop believing you can fix what others say is broken. Danny Jarvis ran the shop until 2008. His son Michael took over, trained by his father in the same skills Danny had learned from Mr. Patterson 40 years before. "What's the most important thing about fixing equipment?" Michael asked once, still learning. Danny thought about it. Believing it can be fixed. Most people give up before they start because someone tells them it's impossible. The first step is refusing to believe that. What's the second step? Learning the skills to prove them wrong. Danny Jarvis died in 2019 at 83. His gravestone reads, "He fixed what couldn't be fixed." Jarvis Repair is still running today. The old Farmall still sits by the front door. And somewhere in the files of the Caddo County Historical Society, there's a receipt dated March 1968. $15 in welding supplies. The most valuable investment Danny Jarvis ever made.